let's talk through how we will put this knowledge about intervals into practice in terms of identifying and drawing intervals. So it will help you be able to do pages 12 and 13 in your theory packet. So for here on page 12, it says for each measure, write the generic interval in the space above the staff. So far, all you've learned is generic intervals. We will eventually learn what the difference is between generic and specific, but for right now, don't let that word confuse you because that's the only option, is to do a generic interval. So if we look at this first one, all we're going to do is we're going to count how far away the notes are. So the first one is here, we count that as 1. There's a line in between them, that's 2. And the next note is on the space, that's 3. So this generic interval is just going to be a third. If we go to the next one, we count the space, that's 1. The line is 2. Space is 3. Line is 4. Space is 5. So that's a fifth. The third one is also a harmonic interval. Remember, a harmonic interval is when two notes are happening at the same time. A melodic is when they're happening at different points in time, which would mean that the notes would be separated and spread out across from each other. So this is a harmonic interval even though they're right next to each other, because if you were to try to put them directly on top of each other, half of each note would cover it up. But if we count this line, that's number 1, and then the space is number 2, so this is a second. So that's all we're doing for the first part. You would just continue along counting your lines and spaces. Just make sure you always count the starting and ending note as part of identifying your interval. If we go to the second part, we have 2 pieces of information. We're given letters along the bottom of the music staff, and we're given numbers across the top. The letters are what letter pitch we're going to start our interval on, and then the number on the top is going to tell us what interval above the note we drew needs to be for our second note. So this says G. I'm going to pretend that I'm doing cello. So I'm going to draw a note on the bottom line for the note G. Obviously, if you're working with an instrument in a different clef than bass clef, you would choose a different line to match the correct pitch. Then we need a fifth above. So we can again just count this line that I drew my note on is 1. 2 is the space, 3 is the line, 4 is the space, 5 is this line, so that's where my note is going to go to create a fifth. And then I would color it in, but I don't want to waste your time. So if we go to a B now, I'll stick with bass clef again. So the note B is right here on this line. Having trouble drawing. There we go. We'll pretend that's beautiful. So that's where the note would be for the bass clef. I could do the B that's up here, but remember we're supposed to be drawing intervals that are above the one we draw first, than the given pitch. And so then I'd have to add ledger lines to get above. I could, but it's a lot less work to do it this way. So I'm going to use this lower B. And then it says I need to go up a third. So I'm going to look at the B, that's a line, so that's 1. The space above it is 2. The next line is going to be my third above. And that's all there is to that. So you've got a couple pages of practicing all of that same concept, so that hopefully you get to the point where your eyes start recognizing these intervals, and you can just look at this one and say, oh, that's a 6th, that's a 4th, that's a 3rd, that's a 7th, and so on and so forth. So I hope that made sense. As always, contact me if you have questions.